All right, today we're going to look at some more applications. In this section, we're going to look at cars and how to finance a car. And actually, a lot of this is pretty relevant to really any sort of personal loan like this that you would take out for a monthly installment payment. So whether it is cars or we'll see mortgages next for houses or student loans, they kind of all work the same way if you have a fixed rate and you have that standard monthly payment. So here we have the mathematics of financing a car. So a loan that you pay off with either weekly or monthly payments, or just payments in some other time period, is called an installment loan. Now I'm going to underline monthly here because that is typically how we make payments on things, although I suppose you could make them more or less frequently, right? But most of our loans tend to be paid monthly. The advantage of an installment loan is that the consumer gets to use the product immediately, but the disadvantage is that interest can add a substantial amount to the cost of the purchase. So the reason we take out a loan is because we don't usually have enough money to pay for the item at that time, right? So cars, for instance, are very expensive items. They could cost you a few thousand or 20,000 or 50,000 or even more. So if you don't have the cash to pay for that car right then and there, what we do is we take out a loan. So it allows us to have that vehicle right then when we need it, but we end up paying interest on the car. So you pay more than what the initial cash price would be for the vehicle over the long run because you have to take out a loan. So we'll begin with car loans in which we make regular monthly payments, and this is a type of fixed installment loan. Now, when you see that word fixed, it typically means that you have the same payment every month, so your interest rate stays the same. It's not changing from month to month. And this tends to be what most of our loans are, but we'll see in the next section that you can have variable rates, which could change your monthly payment. But a lot of times the fixed rate is typically what we want because we can plan for it, right? So we're not going to be caught off guard by a different monthly payment. We know what the monthly payment is for the next, let's say, 5 years, and we can plan for that payment. We're going to use PMT to abbreviate payment. So the regular payment amount required to repay a loan that is P dollars paid N times per year. So again, for us, our N is typically going to be 12 because we're going to pay it monthly over T years at an annual rate R is given by the following formula here. And you can see your text to see how this is derived. It's actually based on really that interest rate formula that we've seen before, but so you can check it out in your text, but we're going to use this formula here. So again, P is your loan amount. R is that rate or that percent. N is going to be the number of times the loan is paid per year. And again, for us, usually it's going to be 12, which is monthly. And T is the number of years altogether that you have the loan for. So suppose you decide to borrow $20,000 for a new car, and you can select one of the following loans, each requiring a regular monthly loan payment. So let's compare. So we're going to find the monthly payment and the total interest for loan A, then we'll do it for loan B, and then we'll compare two. So for loan A, this is going to be a 3-year loan, so our T is going to be 3. The rate is 7%, and again, we use the decimal version, so we're going to use 0.07, moving that decimal 2 spots to the left. Our P here is 20,000 because that's how much we're going to pay for this new car. And our N is going to be 12, again, because we're making monthly payments. So let's say you're doing something different, if it's a monthly payment, your N is going to be 12 here. So I'm going to take this original formula and I'm just going to replace the P, the N, the R, and the T with our values. So your payment is going to be, so let's see, our P is 20,000. R is going to be 0.07 over 12. That's all divided by 1 minus 1 plus R. Oh, I forgot to fill in the R. 0.07 over N, which is 12, to the negative, and then N is 12, and T is 3 here. So at this point, you're really just going to clean up this formula. So you're going to use your calculator here. Just take it one little bit at a time if you need to, to keep rewriting things. And what you should get at the end of using your calculator is 618. So I'll save us a little bit of time in the video by going through the calculator steps here. But you're just going to go ahead and do it out as usual. So that 0.07 divided by 12, multiply by that 20,000. So clean up the numerator. And then the denominator, again, you're going to clean that up. So I would do this first. That's going to be negative 36. And then you're going to do here your division, add it to 1, raise it to the power, and then subtract that value with 1. And then you'll divide your two values. Remember to use as many decimal places as you can when doing these computations and using these formulas. So don't just use a couple, use like 8 decimal places, because when we have anything with exponents, errors add up really quickly. So you want to use as many decimal places as you can. And you get about $618. So I am rounding to one decimal place, to no decimal places here. I'm just using a whole number calculation because that's what your book is doing, but usually we would round that to 2 decimal places. I know I have plenty of loans that have change as part of the monthly payment. That's pretty normal. Now we also want to find the total interest for the loan. So to find the total interest, what we're going to do is we're going to take our monthly payment, which is the 618, and we're going to multiply it by the number of months that we have the loan for. So if you think about it, we have 3 years times 12 months per year means I have 36 months altogether. So you're going to make 36 of these payments. So you're going to pay that 618 36 times. And after you have that number, you're going to subtract it with the original loan amount. So our original loan amount was 20,000. So when you do this, you get $2,248. So that's the extra amount of money that you have paid to take out the loan. So you've paid an extra $2,248 in order to take out that loan. All right, for the next one, we're going to do the same thing here, but for a loan B. So loan B is 5 years at 9%. So our T is 5 this time. Our R is going to be 0.09, again, moving that decimal 2 spots over. Our P is still 20,000 though, and our N is still 12. So 20,000, and then this time it's going to be 0.09 over 12. And then in your denominator, 1 minus 1 plus 0.09 over 12. And that's the negative, let's see, N is 12 and T is 5. And again, we're just going to use our calculator here, right? So you're just going to use your calculator, use as many decimal places as you can just to clean this up step by step, just like we've been doing in the other videos. So again, some things I would do first, like I would clean this up to negative 60. So then once I have this value, I can just raise it to the negative 60th power and then subtract that with 1 in the denominator. And again, I'm using lots and lots of decimal places. And rounding to the nearest whole number here, you're going to get about 415. So a much smaller monthly payment, right? 618 versus 415, that's probably much more reasonable for many people. But let's figure out the total interest. So we have this $415 payment, and our loan is for 5 years this time, and there's 12 months in a year. So you're going to end up making 60 payments altogether. So 415 times 60 is going to be how much you pay, subtracting out the original loan amount. And what you're going to get here, look at my numbers, is 4,900. So you can see that you pay a lot more interest in the long run for 2 reasons. First reason is that you have a higher rate. So notice that you're going from 7% to 9%. And secondly, you have a longer loan. So longer loans and higher rates are going to increase your interest over time. So even if these are both the same rate, because this is longer, you're still going to end up paying more over time. So ideally, when you take out loans, you want it for the lowest interest rate that you can get and for the shortest amount of time that you can afford. A lot of times, particularly if you're shopping for a car, they will, like, let's say your budget is $400 a month for your payment, but the car you want is over budget, right? It's $500 a month. So what most companies or car companies will try to convince you to do is to take out a longer loan. So instead of doing a 5-year loan, maybe you take out a 6 or a 7-year loan. So that way you're in your budget, right, of $400, but you have longer to pay. Now that may seem like a good idea at the time, but keep in mind the longer your loan is, the more interest you're going to pay over the life of that loan. And you also want to keep in mind that cars need maintenance, which is something we're going to talk about too. So the longer you have a car, the more maintenance it's likely going to need. So ideally, if you could pay off that car sooner, then you won't have a monthly payment forever. And then you can take that money and put it towards maintenance for your car when things start breaking down, right? So we need to replace our brakes sometimes, or maybe you need to repair an item, right? And those things are very expensive. So when you get a loan for a car or anything, you want to get it at the lowest interest rate possible and for the shortest amount of time that you can afford. That's how you're going to save some money. Now on your handout here, I do have a link for a simple loan payment calculator, which I really recommend you guys checking out. This works for all loans, so it works for mortgages and stuff too. It works for car loans. So what you can do is you can go to the calculator here, and you can just type in the amount of the loan, the interest rate, and for how many years the loan is for, and it will spit out the monthly payment for you. And it uses this formula here. So let's see actually if I can bring it up really quick and show you guys. Just give me just give me a minute. I have to open it up first and then I'll share my screen. Okay. This is it. All right, I think this is the right one. Let's see. All right, so here it is. Again, there's some advertising on the page. This is through Bankrate. Bankrate actually has lots of calculators that I really like. If you scroll down, so let's try it. Let's put in that car loan of $20,000. The first one was a rate of 7%, and then we were taking it out for 3 years. And if you hit calculate, we got $617.54. And the answer that we got when we rounded was 618. So there's that value right there. And then for your second example here, just changing it to 9% in 5 years, you can see there's the 415.17, or we rounded it to just 415. So you have those values very quickly. Now, I'm not telling you this so you can just blow through the homework and just get the answers right away. I really would like you to try the formula out, right? Try it. But I think this is a good tool to check your answers, because there's a lot of ways that we can make little computational errors, right? So I think it's a good tool to check your answers here. And I also really wanted to share it for real life. Because in real life, if you're going car shopping, you're not going to be sitting here doing these formulas at home on paper. I know when I go car shopping myself, I will actually go to a calculator like this and I'll play around with different values. So I'll look at the market right now and see what interest rates kind of look like. So 7 and 9% are pretty high for interest rates right now. If you have some good credit, and we'll talk about credit and credit scores in a couple of videos, but if you have some good credit and good credit history, you should be looking at lower interest rates, probably in the 3, 4, 5, 6% range for cars. Sometimes you can get lower. So if they're running a special, they might have a 0% interest rate, which is the best. Of course, you pay no interest, or like a 0.9% interest rate. So the lower you can get, the better. And that is something you want to negotiate. A lot of times when you're shopping for a vehicle, you can negotiate on the price of the vehicle, but there isn't always as much wiggle room as maybe you think there would be going in. So maybe you get there and you think, oh, I want this car that's $30,000. I'm going to talk them down to 20,000. You can definitely try it. Sometimes you can make that happen. So there are good times to go shopping, right? And to try to get deals like that, or if it's a car that they just need to move off the lot. But if you're not getting the price that you want, and even if you are, you want to negotiate your rate. So most places will come back with a loan approval for you with a pretty high interest rate. I know I recently bought a car a couple years ago, and we went down 3 percentage points just through negotiating the interest rate. So we moved as much as we could on the price of the vehicle. And at that part, we kind of got stuck, couldn't move anymore. And when we started comparing loans, the initial loan percent that came back was quite high. And I knew that because I had done my research before I went in. So I had looked at other bank sites and saw what the interest rates were. Like, so I went to like Bank of America, I went to DCU, I would just John Deck, whatever bank you normally go to, just look at their rates online and see what they're kind of running for specials. So I knew the rate that they initially gave me was too high. So that's another way that you can really negotiate and get that monthly payment down, is to not settle on a loan with a high rate. particularly if you know you have good credit, right? If you have good credit history and you've always paid your loans and your credit cards on time, then you have more wiggle room there to negotiate. So I wanted to share this with you because, in the real world, I think hopefully, um, before you go and make these large purchases, you're actually thinking about how much it's going to cost first, how much you can budget and plan for. I know that's what I do. So I kind of think about, okay, how much can I afford per month? And then I'll go into one of these calculators and play around. I'll play around with different loan amounts, different interest rates, and kind of see where I fall and say, okay, I think I can afford a car around this much if I can get an interest rate around this much, right? So I kind of have an idea before I go in of what I'm looking for and where I know I can't say yes, right? I have to be like, no, I can't afford that, and walk away. So I think these calculators are really helpful to help you kind of get going before you get in there. So that's just that link on the bottom here that I wanted to show you guys. All right, so let's go back to my other camera. All right, so let's talk to just about some stuff with cars in general. So you don't have to purchase a vehicle, obviously. You can lease a vehicle, and leasing is basically just like renting. So leasing is the practice of paying a specified amount of money over a specified time for the use of a product. And basically, it's just a long-term rental agreement. There's two types of leasing contracts. So you have a close-end lease, which means each month you make a fixed payment based on estimated usage. And when the lease ends, you return the car and pay for the mileage in excess of your estimate. So I think this is what most people think of when they think of a lease, or when you see advertisements. They'll say, "Oh, you can drive this car for $200 a month for 3 years," right? So it's close ended. You have a specific ending date of 3 years there, and it's the same payment every month. Now, there are different payments based on how far you think you will drive. So leasing tends to be better options for people who don't drive as far. If you're putting a lot of mileage on that car, you end up having to pay extra at the end. So usually a lease will cover, I'm just guessing here, like around the first 10,000 miles for the year. But after that, you have to pay a premium on top of it. So it's something to consider. An open-end lease is what it is. There's no end date for it. Each month you make a fixed payment based on the car's residual value. The residual value is the estimated resale value of the car at the end of the lease and is determined by the dealer. Um, so it's not open-ended in that you could have the car forever, we'll say, but it's based on what you think the resale of the car is going to be instead of just a standard fixed monthly payment. So when the lease ends, you compare it to its residual value. And if the appraised value is less than the residual value, you pay all or a portion of the difference. And if the appraised value is greater than or equal to the residual value, you owe nothing and may receive a refund. So basically, they look at how much can they sell this car after you're finished renting it. And they kind of have you pay the difference between what they paid for, or like what the cash price would be versus how much they can sell it for. So that's kind of what you're paying over the life of your lease instead. So they work a little bit different. I feel like closed end lease are probably more so what you see when you think of it on TV and stuff like that. Now, there are advantages and disadvantages. So advantages of leasing, leasing only requires usually a small down payment. It's usually still like $1,000 or $2,000 though, so it's not like it's super tiny. Although some of them will have no down payment. Lease payments for a new car are usually lower than loan payments for the same car, so it's usually less expensive. And most people can lease a more expensive car than they would be able to buy. When the lease ends, you return the car to the dealer and you do not have to be concerned about selling the car. So you're renting it. This is also a good option for people who, again, don't drive too far because that mileage can really add up and increase your payments at the end when you turn in your vehicle. And it's also good for people who like to always have a new car, right? So if you're that type of person who you're going to buy a new car and then you want another one in a couple of years, you want the next best thing, you're that type that always likes to have a nice new beautiful car, then leasing is probably a good option for you, or at least something to think about, right? So what are disadvantages? When the lease ends, you do not own the car, so you have no equity. It's just gone. So you just pay to rent it for those years, and now if you want another car, you have to start all over again, right? So like I mentioned, most lease agreements usually have mileage limits from 12 to 15,000 a year. Some of them are even as low as 10 or lower. So if you exceed the number of miles allowed, there can be a lot of charges at the end of the lease. When mileage penalties and other costs in the leasing period are taken into consideration, the total cost of leasing is almost always more expensive than financing a car. So again, if you're really good about leasing and you know you're not driving far and you're gonna stick to all the requirements, then it could be a good deal for you. But if you think you're gonna go over or have other penalties and things, then you may just be spending too much money. While leasing the car, you're responsible for keeping it in perfect condition and you're liable for any damage. And leasing does not cover maintenance. There could be some, even with financing, there could be some companies now that like kind of do a promotion where like they will cover like the first year or two of like maintenance or oil changes or things like that, but a lot of them don't. So you still have to pay for a lot of times maintenance. And there could be penalties for ending the lease early. Car leases tend to be extremely complicated, so it can appear that there are many lease deals as there are kinds of cars. A helpful pamphlet entitled Keys to Vehicle Leasing is published by the Federal Reserve Board, and copies are available on the internet. So this is all copied from your text if you want to look more into leasing instead of purchasing a vehicle. All right, a couple of things to talk about here. So when you have a car, don't forget you have to pay for car insurance. A lot of states require this, it's mandated by law. So who needs auto insurance? The simple answer is that if you own or lease a car, you do. So there are some places that don't require it, but I would highly not recommend that. So in Massachusetts, you do have to have car insurance. So when you purchase insurance, you buy protection against the loss associated with unexpected events. Different types of coverage are associated with auto insurance, but the one required by nearly every state is liability. So there are two components of liability coverage. You have bodily injury liability, which covers the cost of lawsuits if someone is injured or killed in an accident in which you are at fault, and property damage liability, which covers damage to other cars and property from negligent operation of your vehicle. So again, it's your fault. If you have a car loan or car lease, you will also need collision and comprehensive coverage. So collision coverage pays for damage or loss of your car if you're in an accident, and comprehensive coverage protects your car from perils such as fire, theft, falling objects, acts of nature, and collision with an animal. There's definitely a big difference in auto insurance rates, so you definitely want to shop around, and even shop around, maybe not every year, but every couple of years. So if you notice that your price keeps going up, then shop for another company. It's pretty common to shop around every few years. Insurance can be very expensive for younger drivers with limited driving experience, and a poor driving record can also increase your insurance rates. So other factors impact your insurance premium, which include where you live. So typically, if you live in a busier city, your insurance rates are higher, right? Because there's more chance for an accident. The number of miles you drive each year, the value of your car, even the color of your car, all these things can affect the price of insurance. You can also think about if you want a new or a used car. So new cars do lose an average of 12% of its value the moment it's driven off the dealer's lot, because then it's considered used, even if you haven't arrived home yet. So new cars depreciate, which means they decrease in value very, very quickly. So used cars could be a good option for many people. Your best buy is typically a 2 or 3 year old car because the annual depreciation of price is greatest over the first few years. So if you buy it like a couple years in, then it's still losing money each year, but not as fast. And furthermore, many sources of financing for used cars will loan money only on newer models that are less than 5 years old. Reputable car dealerships offer a good selection of used cars with extended warranties and other perks. One thing I will note, not always, but often used cars sometimes have higher interest rates for loans rather than new cars. So that's something to consider too. Like I said, not always, but a lot of times I have found on a personal experience that used vehicles tend to have higher interest rates than new vehicles when purchasing a loan or and signing up for a loan. So something to think about there too. And again, it's up to each person. So I myself have had used cars, I've had new cars. It just depends what you want to do. And when I purchase a new car, I understand that the price is going to depreciate. But for me personally, I know I'm going to have the car for a very long time. So I'm that type of person that when I purchase a vehicle, I'm going to drive it until that car doesn't run anymore. So I don't mind buying a new car because I'm not going to sell it. I'm going to pretty much run it to the ground is the way I put it. So I'll just keep repairing it until it doesn't make sense to repair it anymore and it's costing too much money. So you need to do what's best for you. So used cars are good, new cars are good. You just want to make sure you go to a reputable dealer no matter which way you go, right? So you want someone who's going to be trustworthy and honest about that car and also about your loan.